to just explain to some of you guys that might be new to the Salon series. This is absolutely an experimental Salon series. It's something that we're proposing as a way to basically provoke questions. So, to introduce Jamie Duffy, the executive director here with Youth on Record. She is going to be talking to us about a project in particular that had to do with creativity and pertaining specifically to music and what that has to do with education and what lessons we might be able to learn when looking at the development of some of the north neighborhoods in Denver. So thank you. If we could welcome Jamie. And then Coby Gould, the executive director, master of the universe, friendliest person on earth, as I've been told. Official title is the executive director for GrowHaus, who has some really interesting insights about health and about cultivating things and what teaching our community has to do with not only the health of our neighborhoods, but bringing together communities and what design might have to do with it too.
I want to start with you, Coby. Tell us a little bit about GrowHaus and the mission there.
Sure, and thanks for having me. I think the room is probably filled with brilliant people, so I'm excited to hear what questions people have. The GrowHaus, for those who are unfamiliar, is a nonprofit half-acre indoor farm in North Denver. It's in the Elyria-Swansea neighborhood, so just north of I-70 on York Street, kind of by the Purina Dog Chow facility. And we have renovated an old Lair's Flower Distribution Center, basically into an operating food production site using hydroponics, aquaponics, and permaculture, and as well as distribution sites. We have a little marketplace, and we do food distribution out of there and package boxes of food that go out to the community and the general public every week. And then we do educational events and field trips for children on everything from food access, food justice, to how do you garden, what is soil, vermicomposting, chicken keeping, those sorts of fun things, and eating healthy. And the goal really is to provide that neighborhood in particular, but really the larger Denver area, with a food hub to start the conversation around healthy access, affordable access for folks who normally can't afford or don't have the opportunity to connect to that need.
Yeah, that's I guess one of the points of connection with what you're up to, Jamie, with Youth on Record. Just give us a little background, set the table about Youth on Record and what your mission is there.
Yeah, we were founded by members of the Flowbots with this understanding that music is a powerful tool for engaging young people. We've since evolved over the past 6 years into an organization that is doing something that we haven't seen, I think, on a national level yet, which is we employ local musicians to teach every single day in Denver public schools and in youth residential treatment centers. So these are folks who are getting together in the creative industries, not to throw benefit concerts to raise money for education, but actually every single day to address the education crisis head on. So now in our inception, we teach 36 4-credit classes in Denver public schools with some of the most at-risk and underserved kids. And our classes are used as an incentive to keep them in school. So these kids are at least a year behind. And we've been brought in as sort of the carrot on the stick, because our classes are really engaging and our artists are just incredible. So we teach music production, we teach an introduction to music fundamentals class, spoken word poetry, advanced music production, a social problems and solution course, and MC school. So what on earth this has to do with architecture? Well, we decided to be completely nuts, and in our 3rd year of existence, with very little money, we decided to embark on a $2 million capital campaign to build what we call a youth media studio. I'm happy to say that it's almost built, but we are teaching classes every single day in the youth media studio. We're part of the Denver Housing Authority's redevelopment project, the La Alma, Lincoln Park, La Mariposa redevelopment. Do you guys know? Have you heard about that project? Yeah. So we essentially got that prime real estate, the first in Maine, 5,000 square feet. And I'll wrap this up, but the reason that we wanted to build this studio was this. We definitely employ who I believe are the best and brightest musicians in this city. And we're sending them to the schools and the residential treatment centers to teach their craft. And for me, it would be like sending Denver's top chefs into the schools to teach their craft. Well, how much more powerful would it be if they were able to teach it in a state-of-the-art culinary academy? So that's essentially what we're building, is a state-of-the-art youth media studio where the kids will get to come into the recording studio, into the music production lab, and learn the art form there.
That's great. I mean, we've worked with at-risk student populations in the past, and you get a sense with some of these kids that they are very powerful souls, but they're kind of on the cusp. They could go one direction and become a gang leader, and with just a quarter turn, they might become a community leader.
Right.
And in my book, a lot of that has to do with creativity and expression. Are you able to see that? At least is there anecdotal evidence that these kids, over the course of a year or two, with this education, turn around and become more focused, become what?
Yeah, I mean, part of, we're a nonprofit organization, so we have to account to, of course, our funders and our donors and the school district. The proof is sort of in the pudding with the students. They themselves will say, this program has saved my life. And I think, it's definitely through, we use the creative arts as the tool. So I love that saying, when you are inspired, you are creating, and when you are creating, everything is working. So we use the arts as a tool to reach them, but I also think that the key for us is healthy adult intervention. There is so much evidence saying that if you as a kid, and this is any kid, this is, I had somebody say to me the other day, and I think they're right, that every single middle schooler in this country is at risk in some way, of what? Depression, being involved in, a violent culture, drugs, who knows. But studies prove time and time again, if you have one adult who is not in your immediate family take an interest in you, it dramatically improves your life, it improves your performance in school. I mean, how many of you here had like that one adult, meaning a coach, meaning an aunt or uncle who, because your parents kind of, for the most part, have to give a shit about you, but, kind of. But this adult outside of your circle doesn't. And so when they come in and say, I think you're amazing. I mean, we have one of our teachers here, Josh Aveda, who that's what he does every day. And so I think that's what's really changing them. And then the art is our tool to get into them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about attention. I think attention is really important. Kids, and unfortunately, sometimes it's across economic lines, more affluent families have more attention. It's not just sort of commands that are given to them. It's complex language, it's constructive play, and just a lot of attention. Same thing goes with food, doesn't it? I mean, when your grandmother pays really close attention and loves the food that she's making for you, it's more nutritious, it tastes better. And there's something quantum mechanically that happens with it because of attention that makes it better for us, right? I mean, and you guys, it's not just food production, it's food education, it's food distribution. Talk a little bit more about that quality of bringing kids into that space with food.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, where there's that attention of the parent. I think the other thing that we're trying to create in our space is a place where children and students feel like it's a space that is really welcoming and is exciting, and is outside of, say, the classroom experience of being in a pretty sterile environment where you just have a chalkboard and want to learn something. You're actually in a living classroom. You're in a place where there are trees around you. There's food growing that you can pick and eat. Like, we like to think of it as almost like Willy Wonka-esque, is where you have this experience where you can pick from the tree and eat it, and it's really playful. And I think building that environment, that learning environment that is really engaging for us has been really important as another point of access to that conversation and feeling welcome. And we have had a number of students who come from those disadvantaged backgrounds. One in particular, we have a youth, Alex, who was in gangs in Montbello, and he came through our youth program and then became an intern. And said that just being in the space, being around that kind of natural environment, even though it's right in the middle of one of the most urban industrial parts of Denver, he could walk into this space and feel like at ease. We set up some hammocks. He used to like just come and read and hang out on the hammocks after school, and it allowed him the space he needed to just kind of deal with what it was in his life.
So you're in Elyria, Swansea. That's a neighborhood that's somewhat peripheral to a lot of Denverites. It's sort of off in its own world. Why choose to set up shop there? And what have you found about that sort of changing population as you have made your mark there?
Yeah, to that point, and Drew's actually here, probably can speak to this much more than I can, so I encourage him to speak on that behalf. To that, I was thinking that there's like that painting that's really popular now of like all the Denver neighborhoods, you know, and like the highways that go through. And Elyria, Swansea, and Globeville, as far as I know, are not on there. And it bugs me every time I see that. Yeah, so it's like the kind of squares or rectangles or shapes that represent the geographical area of the Denver neighborhoods, and it's like a popular poster that's going around right now.
I mean, there may be a metaphor there geographically for spreading attention around the city. I mean, one of our clients is AIA Colorado, and I don't know if you guys are aware of the board, a lot of you are, of the board structure there and how the 5 legal entities are merging into 1 legal entity. And a lot of the people down south in Colorado Springs and out west and Aspen and Steamboat and elsewhere are a little bit worried. Yes, they're renegade spirits, autonomous types, but they're a little worried that they're going to be even more disconnected from the conversation. I think it's really important to engage not only those kids who have been maybe somewhat neglected, but also those neighborhoods which have need to be folded into the more mainstream conversation. It's great that you guys, can you speak to, you're up in that neck of the woods as well, Mariposa sort of.
We're not, we're actually West Denver, so we're just
Okay.
1 block west of the 10th and Osage light rail stop.
Youth on Record, your program coming into Mariposa, La Alma, has made a difference to this community?
When I learned about this redevelopment project actually through Terra. And at first, I was actually incredibly skeptical. I've done international development work. So I was, no offense to where we're sitting right now, but I was absolutely terrified that we were creating the new Highlands. Because I was just afraid.
Gentrification central.
Yeah, I was terrified for the families who lived there. So then I got my hands on the master plan and actually read the master plan, and it was one of the most thoughtful things I've ever read in my life. So the Denver Housing Authority did a 7-year community health and needs assessment to make sure that this redevelopment project was actually not only moving the community forward, but addressing their direct needs. So they implemented sort of new ideas, something called rolling redevelopment, which seems so intuitive, I think, to all of us, that you don't tear down first and then build second, because where do people go when you tear their house down? And for people who are, Section 8 residents, what tends to happen for those families is they get shipped off to a completely different neighborhood. It wreaks havoc on the school district, because all of a sudden you've got kids who are in a school that they know nothing about, potentially with, opposing neighborhoods, opposing gangs, very different cultures. So the fact that they built first, moved families into phase 1, was one, just one aspect. But as far as us being there, we have the best partnership with the Denver Housing Authority, and they picked our project largely because 4240 wrote us into their RFP and said, even if it was the most generous thing anybody's ever done for us. Even if you don't choose us as the firm, choose them. And the Denver Housing Authority did that. So the reason that they say that we're rent-free, that they've invested $1.4 million into us, is because we can bring a sort of cultural heart to the neighborhood that they believe is the #1 most important thing in making it work.
Yeah.
What they say is, we're in the business of building, and you all are in the business of creating culture. And so that's essentially what we're tasked to do, and the #1 way to do that is to build relationships with the kids and the community. And I can't believe that stretch there. I mean, that is definitely a fascinating neighborhood. From the 10th and Osage light rail stop on 10th Avenue, I have not seen a busier walking street. I mean, there are Josh, when you're there, I mean, there are hundreds of kids who walk by there every single day, and they poke in, and they, so I think if that answers your question, what they saw, I think, in us that we could bring to their entire 7-phase development project is like a heart and a soul. So they just recently renamed the neighborhood officially La Alma, which means the soul. And so they're calling the youth media studio, El Corazon, like the heart of this.
You're mapping out territory in the aural dimension, bandwidths, waves of sound, and how that informs the spirit. Food might be seen to be similar, right? It casts off a certain wavelength or a map, a frequency map that makes you either healthier or makes you degenerate, right? And
that's hippie talk.
Yeah. I'd be very comfortable talking about this in Gould. Talk about how important food is for kids, because I imagine some of these kids shuttle back and forth from motels to foster parents to homeless shelters, and they show up, they don't have any food to school, and all of a sudden, okay, now write a haiku or do a hard math problem.
Yeah, I think that's the real connection is between food and health. And then if there's so many students that are going to school that eat a candy bar for breakfast. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys are architects. You go to work and I'm sure have a bowl of cereal or worse before you head in on a busy day, and what that does to your productivity at about 12 o'clock, if not sooner. And these are students that are asked to pay attention and be serious, and are probably too many of them in the classroom when they're not getting fed right at home. And so that's certainly an issue. And then to the more spiritual or hippy piece of it.
Bring it.
I mean, food is something that culture is built off of, that we come together around a table, everybody enjoys food. When you eat, you feel fulfilled and you're more likely to share, to feel comfortable, to feel relaxed when you've had a good meal. Like a lot of good conversations happen around a dinner table or a lunch meeting or something like that. And so we often say that food is actually the lens to talk about some of these other issues, some of these social issues that are happening in the community. And if we can bring people together around the plate, because that's somewhere that everybody eats, everybody has a story about food, about their culture, about what their parents made that they liked, or even that Taco Bell that they love. Something about it is exciting and brings people together. So
presumably there's an analogy between that and sound, isn't there? Is there nutritious sound and non-nutritious, like empty carbs sound?
Sometimes you have to, and that's not empty sound. Like we would argue, like that's not empty sound. Like we'll start with, we'll have to start with Lil Wayne or whomever it is that they're relating to, because we want to see where they're coming from, And so, especially for us, if we're talking about like hip hop and some of the themes in hip hop, we all know it well, bitches and hoes and bling and all, all the fun stuff. We have to start there, because then we need to start asking the question, like, well, why are all women in rap music bitches, right? And then you can get to the point with them where I think they'll tell you why, and some of it might be real for them, I mean, a lot of these sort of stories that you're hearing in like gangster rap and things, those are based on real life. It hasn't been easy for these kids, and so they need some sort of cathartic way to get that out. So we'll start there, and we've had, I mean, it's been interesting. The schools have given us liberty to do that. The treatment centers have given us liberty to do that. So sometimes you can walk into our classrooms and you're like, ooh, I hope that wasn't the principal, because you're hearing things through the speakers in the public school setting that you normally wouldn't hear, but we use that as an entry point. And then my philosophy is we're not going to lead you to it if we're not going to lead you through it. Like if we can't get you to the other side.
That's right.
So the idea is, that's sort of why we offer the social problems and solutions class. So within that class, that's taught by MCs, but that class is really an examination of the most pressing social issues of our time, most of which are affecting the student populations we're serving. So you can teach that class at some high schools, and you can talk about food justice. Like, isn't that terrible? Isn't it terrible that some people don't have access to healthy food? You know, you could talk about poverty, and isn't that awful that some kids are really poor and don't get to eat every single day? But talk about those issues with the kids who are actually facing them every day. So part of what we're asking our students to do is to take that social problems and solutions class before they take our MC school. Like, we're not going to teach you to be like a master MC until you've started to critically examine some of the most pressing issues of our time, so that when you are the next generation of lyricists, those lyrics are nutrition. So we teach at West High School's alternative high school, right? Our students are not allowed to go through the front door of West High School. They are in the basement, and they enter in the basement, and they enter in the back door. And so we all know about environment. I had students talking about it today, how cold it gets in their school, right? Because they don't get to go upstairs. They're downstairs in the basement, and I heard them laughing about how cold it is and how glad they are to have class at the youth media studio, because their school is in the old storage space of the real high school. So think about that, being a kid, like that's the students we serve. Like, you walk into that environment every single day, the storage space of the real high school through the back door, and you're supposed to wake up every day and be like, yeah, I'm gonna take this world over. Like, no way. And so that's part of the reason we built the youth media studio. We wanted to build a badass, state-of-the-art studio for them. Not in Wash Park, not for, no offense to everybody who went to East High School, but not for East, like for our kids who have to go to school in the basement.
It's amazing though, I mean, if you look at places like India, Calcutta, let's say, where there's a huge disparity between incomes, and you have this billion-dollar private residence right next door to this little girl walking barefoot through raw sewage. The thing is, the quality of life, the happiness, the bliss is really indistinguishable from both. In fact, you might even think that the poorer people have more continuity in their family and more sort of daily happiness, even though they're confronted with all those challenges. And there's something to be said for, just because you don't have affluence doesn't mean you can't be happy. And I think music and food must be contributed.
I would say something. I just do have to address this point though, and I take this from I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and so I think what you said about this idea of there is affluence and severe poverty right next to each other. So I think the notion of like that you can be poor, that like poor is synonymous with, you can be poor but happy. I mean, I hate to say this, but I think now that's bullshit. Because I do, because...
Good night, everybody.
No, not you. I'm not saying to you. But the truth is, like, I do think that it is because you see around, it used to be that way. I do think that it used to be in a way that you didn't have access to what could be. But I think for, like, our students, they get to see every day, like, what their life could be. I mean, they literally can look upstairs in their high school and say, well, that's not me, that's not, I mean, those kids have more access to, so I think, technology, the internet, television, and the fact that these communities are merging.
There's certainly more class consciousness too, just because of pop culture, et cetera.
Well, I think the sounds, that's what the huge thing that food and music have in common is that it's a multi-sensory experience. You've got the food and it just brings you all these memories and the smells and the sounds, bring these visions, and that can't be bought, and that's not a technology issue, that's not a class issue. That's why these are such important, fundamental things to cultivate, because that's really what makes people happy.
I think that one of the things for people that we work with is actually the connection between technology and the sort of very hands-on. We've both so we kind of define our areas of impact in zones. So like zone 1 is the Elyria Swansea local community, zone 2 is broader near Northeast Denver, and zone 3 is like more general public, foodie, interested in that conversation. And we want to have the greatest impact in our community, but expand and have a conversation between all these different communities and layers.
I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to ask a question and bring it back a little bit to the sense of the built environment. Because architecture is basically about a sense of place. And communities, and in the old days, there was a sense of ownership about your school, about your neighborhood and such. And my question has to do with no offense intended, but we've been a little bit esoteric here, and I'm wondering, to address the question of a sense of ownership, the communities that you're working in, and you haven't mentioned parents necessarily, and if I were a kid sitting here and wondering, or if someone asked me, what is my music space, or what is this food opportunity space, hope to build that sense of ownership in the community.
Yeah, I think that's such an important question. So going back to the master plan, and Terra's read it, of the Mariposa redevelopment, and speaking of the parents, so they had a steering committee of, I can't remember how many people, but they were residents in the neighborhood, and they essentially helped to craft, you know, what this space would look like. And it was fascinating what they were asking for. So the community itself, we were invited into the community. So I feel like there's already a sense of community ownership of our space and of our project, especially the folks who were on the steering committee, who are considered sort of leaders in their community. But aside from that, I think that you would definitely feel so we just opened for classes in January. And yeah, and we're not done yet, but we have students in the space every single day, and I think just coming by, you definitely have a sense that they do own it. And our new philosophy, so we have our first student who is actually a part-time employee now of Youth on Record. She's my executive assistant. She's amazing, former student, Diana. And our goal, my director of programs, and my goal is that in 10 years, our students are running the business. And the idea being that they've owned it, that they will continue to grow the space.
Talk about skin in the game too, that
Exactly.
they're the ones that are cultivating the opportunities.
Yeah.
It's not just some teacher or some authority figure telling them what to do. They've got skin in the game. Do you find that same thing
Exactly.
too, Coby, with what you were trying to cultivate there at GrowHaus?
Yeah, so I'll be just upfront that when we started the GrowHaus, it was a developer who's done a lot of developments up here in the Highlands who bought the facility. I'm the executive director, and it was a good friend of mine, also a white male. So 3 white males starting an organization in a primarily Latino low-income community. So we came in. But from day one, we were very intentional about the fact that we wanted to engage the community in that process, having listening sessions, open houses, and our mission is neighborhood-based, community-driven. And that reaching out, getting the voice of the community, bringing the community in as quickly and as honestly as possible, while still acknowledging the foundation of the organization, was key. And the ways in which we've done that is having community members on our board, so at the highest level, getting community members onto staff as quickly as possible. We now have 4 people who live in the community on our staff. Of those, though, only 2 are actually grew up in the neighborhood, so I do have to say that. And also people that speak Spanish. So every day our market has somebody from open to close that speaks Spanish, so that there's that translation, that language barriers there is crossed. And then in the decision making too, so making sure that we're going to community events, going to meetings about I-70 redevelopment and some of these other things that happen in the neighborhood, so we're hearing the voice of the neighborhood and incorporating that into our work, and same with the design. And then in terms of the education, we don't just do children education, we do education for adults. And we have a micro-farmer training program right now, which is, it's about 20 residents, all adults in the neighborhood. We do childcare so that they can not worry about that, it's during the day. And teach them about how to do everything from build soil and compost to how they might start a small business out of their backyard selling chickens, or doing a small garden where they can source the food to us, and then we would sell that food to the restaurants that we work with. So and that was one of the things when we moved in that we heard. We were like, hey, we're about healthy food. People are like, oh, that's great. Also, we need jobs, and we need better livelihood. So we're trying to address that issue as well, and really, honestly listening to the community and putting that back into the work.
That's great, not just lip service. We've got just a couple minutes left, and we want to
Could I
turn it
make a
over to the
comment?
audience for a second. Yeah, please.
So I wanted to go back to what Jamie said about community, and I think it ties into what Coby said too. Is thinking about culture, as a hub for reinvesting in neighborhoods. And I was lucky enough to work on the youth media studio, and I think I can speak for Terra as well when I say that it was contagious. To have something that was going to reinvent a neighborhood. It wasn't like I just went to work and worked on some construction documents. People would come into our office and they'd say, "Hey, what are you guys working on?" And we'd say, "Oh, this is this really cool project for Youth on Record." And they'd say, and then a week later, they'd be back with their friends and they'd be saying, "Oh, here's this project down in La Alma, and look at all these things it's doing." And so when it comes to the question about who owns it, I think it's contagious, and it is absolutely like, it's not Youth on Record, it's not the kids, it's not the design team, it's everybody, and it's absolutely contagious. And I think you probably see that in the same thing with food, is that when people start to recognize how exciting, positive change can be, that it's contagious. And so we very much saw that with the media studio. I think that Chad's family would come into, or whoever would walk into the office, and it wasn't just like another architecture project. It was, and people wanted to talk about it. And so I think my point is that the sort of ownership of projects like this is very organic. It's not just the kids and the staff. It's much more than that.
Yeah. I would also say, some of our biggest owners is the Denver music community. So we recently did something for Colorado Gives Day that we said, match the musician. So we were asking we asked all of Colorado musicians to contribute something as a band to the next generation of musicians. And we had over 40 bands, local bands, and these guys don't make any money, guys. They all contributed, and so we had the fortune of living with our architect for 3 months while our project was pushed back. And I just have to say, it was a fascinating experiment, I think, for both of us. So our lease was up in our old space, and our project, not because of the architects, but was pushed back by almost 3 months. And so our architect was like, just move in with us. And it was a cool sort of collaboration, because we were working on a project every single day together, but culturally we were doing, I think, what you guys are trying to do with this salon, like 2 sectors that may not be so intimately involved had to be in each other's workspace. And we were shocked, man, because my whole staff are musicians, and if you've ever met my director of programs, he walks through the door, he's either gonna walk in so excited, dropping the F-bomb, or so pissed off, dropping the F-bomb. And it's gonna take you at least a minute to figure out which is which, right?
I kind of want to.
And we didn't.
Do you work there? Can you tell us your
Yeah, Abeda works there, but working with them real quick, we would come in with the architects doing that, because that is just totally our work culture. And I laughed when the comedian was like, take your heads off your screen, because we would walk in like that and everybody would be in the CAD what are they doing,
Well,
It's
that's
awesome.
That's
It was
the restaurant culture too. That's
and they used to manage restaurants, so yeah, that. So we're like, this is Youth on Record. It's not a bar. That is not, But it was a cool sort of. I think that sort of So we started talking about co-working spaces. Most co-working spaces, you're in the same profession, But for us, we weren't, and so it was a pretty rad experience. We loved it.
Cities aren't really zoned, and the rules do not necessarily regulate things like urban farming. What kind of restrictions do you guys bump against, and have you had any luck in terms of getting around them or getting them advanced so that they're known Boulder, they have a chicken deal, you can only have chickens if it's a non-commercial thing, but that has not always been the case, and that's pretty recent. HOAs slowly adopt that as time goes on. I'm just curious, on a full-scale city setting, what you guys kind of hit in terms of restrictions?
I think very much the city's figuring it out.
Yeah.
And this whole urban ag thing is an interesting thing for the city to kind of go, because there's a whole history of there was farming in the city and then it got pushed out, and even a socioeconomic thing where who owned chickens and why, and there were different communities that owned them and reasons why they set laws so that they could no longer keep chickens because they were pissing the more affluent people off. And now there's the more affluent people who are saying, can we have our chickens back? And then now the people without money are going, what are you crazy people doing now? So there's a whole history here that we're addressing. And the city is very much figuring it out. For the most part, they've been really good about it. And we have kind of we had to go through a lot of zoning stuff to get set up to begin with, so that we were okay. And then it's been a constant conversation.
Well, and I will say really quick on Coby's behalf, I've known this project from the beginning. So because of people like Coby and organizations like this, I feel like you guys are definitely helping to, I think, craft the direction and shape where the city is going to go as far as things like that. I mean, they're on the forefront there, and they're pushing the envelope so that it moves the entire city.
No doubt. Another comment from the audience?
So my name is Joshua. I am one of the teachers at Youth on Record. I also run my own business teaching music called I Can Jam Studios, and I co-manage a gallery on Santa Fe called Carbon Gallery. And just to kind of like tie a couple things together, I've been fortunate enough to see GrowHaus happen. I haven't been as involved with GrowHaus as I have been with Youth on Record, but I have had family who've lived in that neighborhood, and I knew Lairs when it was still Lairs. And what I really want us all to think about is why we're here, and the reason being that, like Jamie said, we had, they had, Youth on Record had the environment where they just kind of got thrown into a space with another discipline. And when we're thinking about these big solutions for the big world, and for not just like these at-risk kids, but for everybody, because we all have solutions that we need to move us into in a higher state of being. But really being in a space where we can share cross-disciplinary information that may seem irrelevant to someone who's doing something completely different, but I always kind of picture that scene in A Beautiful Mind where Russell Crowe's looking out the window and he sees the birds and then like the numbers just appear to him. I've had experiences like that where I'm in a discipline where I was completely unfamiliar, and then later on somehow that sparked an idea that in my music class later on I was able to turn that into a lesson. And we have rappers who are coming into classrooms rapping about organic gardens, and then those songs are going out and promoting.
What rhymes with rutabaga, right? That's the whole question.
Right. And so it's just really, I want us all, before we leave, just to kind of reflect on why we're here, and not just within our disciplines, but cultivating the bigger solutions.
It was really important for us to have the Youth on Record guys be like, hey, quit looking at the computer so much, think a little bit, think differently,
People that get pushed around, that's as much of a lesson as that educational thing that you all think that people that just don't come from money don't have. Like, there's a lot of life lessons from experiencing the world.
Maybe 2 seconds on my background. I spent a long time at IBM with IT and marketing degrees, and I went back and got a master's in architecture so I could be a campus master planner. So I've been designing schools all over the world for a number of years, and then I recently left that world to go to Pearson, which is the largest learning company. So everything here today is fabulous. And if you take it, I guess, to a more global perspective of trends in education, the trends in education are gamification and tablets and sort of this new world of really understanding how a student learns versus how we used to teach. So dramatic changes in pedagogy. And it's really easy to look at that and say, well, we can only do that if Bill Gates gives us $1 million, like DSST, right? It's a beautiful building, and it's very much an active learning space, and you've got competency-based learning, and all of those great notions that are out there. But you can still take all of those ideas and simplify them and apply them to food and apply them to music and make them just as successful there. Especially if you look at, I think, one of the key trends, which is competency-based learning. You can have a student that goes to an A&P class and goes to a phlebotomy lab, and now they know how to draw blood. So it's an active learning environment where they take that competency and they have proof of that knowledge and they can carry that forward. They have higher retention rates in that experience. But growing your own food is still on that spectrum of education. It's just a different tool. It's a different competency. So if you teach someone to grow something and say you've grown something, they've learned a little bit. But if you teach them to grow it and you train them to understand they can take that competency and carry it forward and expand it to other areas of knowledge, that's a learning moment for that student, and that's how they can move on. Especially when you're looking at high school and post-secondary age students, they're wise enough to want to learn how they learn best. So think of the left brain and the right brain and how they all learn. They need that opportunity to explore how they discover and assimilate information, which is probably not the didactic center, that's your 5%. You're looking at the active learning area, which is higher attention rates, 8% and above. That's what you're giving them when you're teaching about food. So they get to grow the food, but they also deserve to know why they learned it and how they can move forward to that next.
Well, Terra, I guess we can see another salon taking shape there. Really, really beautifully put. Thank you. We couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your time tonight.